Now, it looks as if there's been a breakthrough in the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, of course, announcing that he's agreed a ceasefire deal to end the fighting with Hezbollah, the terrorist organisation that kind of runs Lebanon. Let's find out exactly where we stand here. Could be an encouraging day over there in that war-torn district. So let's talk to, he's currently in northern Israel, war correspondent Zach Anders. Hi, Zach.
Hi, Kevin. How are you? I'm
good, thank you. Thanks very much for joining us. What's your understanding of this? For example, the Israel Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, a right-winger, he's opposed to this deal, but does it strike you that it's going through anyway? Is this really a thing? Is this happening?
It is. The ceasefire is supposed to go into effect tomorrow morning. Within the last 10 minutes, we just had a massive volley from Hezbollah about 50 miles deep inside Israeli territory. We're still waiting for the ambulance service. They say they're en route right now to some reports of rocket impact sites. So probably within the next few minutes, we'll get word. At the same time, the IDF is still performing airstrikes in Lebanon. I've got a source in Beirut that says that while the prime minister was giving this address, that there were still strikes going on. We think that there's going to be still exchanges back and forth tonight until this ceasefire takes place tomorrow morning. While the Israeli public, and there's already been a snap poll that some of the local TV channels have put out, asking, do you believe that Hezbollah has been defeated? 61% of the respondents for Channel 13 here in Israel said no. They don't believe that Hezbollah has been defeated. There were protests tonight. You mentioned Itamar Ben-Gvir. There's other ministers who have said that this is not the right time. This is not the right deal. It's a pretty wide sentiment that Israelis feel that they had Hezbollah on the run. 2 nights ago, Hezbollah launched 250 rockets into Israel. And the sign there was for the Israeli public, they still have that rocket capacity. They can still fire into Israel. They can still threaten northern communities. So we should probably keep going until we find a way to dismantle what's left of them. That's where we enter into this period. And I don't want to speak too much into the intent of something that we haven't seen happen yet. But I have Israeli sources that have been telling me this is a ceasefire. This is not the end of the war. Mm-hmm. There's a 60-day period. And what happens in 60 days, President-elect Trump will be in office about 3 days before this ceasefire is set to expire, January 26th. So the threats that we had reported last week, that Amos Hochstein, the U.S. Special Envoy, came to Beirut and then came to Israel, spoke directly to Prime Minister Netanyahu. The threat that was communicated, according to a couple of sources we have, was the U.S. telling the Prime Minister, accept this ceasefire or we will not shield you in the United Nations Security Council while I'm still in office. So this is a good period for the Israeli forces. And even the Prime Minister tonight said as much, that we need to give our forces a break. There needs to be a period where we rearm, we recollect, and we refocus our efforts. It's widely believed, based on conversations I've had, they will continue this conflict in Lebanon, but there will be a pause.
So are you saying that Netanyahu is responding to a sort of diktat from America then, from Biden?
I think that's what's happening here is the threat of withholding arms shipments, the threat of potentially having a UN Security Council vote where America doesn't use its veto power, and Israel is exposed to some potentially pretty damaging binding resolutions. Things are lining up here. The weather's also terrible and miserable. We're hearing about tanks getting stuck in the mud, troops freezing in southern Lebanon because of this cold and wet weather. So for the Israelis, they feel like they're in a period where they could take a pause and recollect, like the Prime Minister says, and re-engage, because that threat is still there. And based on all of Hezbollah's actions over the last year, are they going to really uphold a ceasefire? Are they going to be the party that does not violate this ceasefire? Well, in 60 days, are we really not going to see any rocket fire, any drones? Hezbollah is a cohesive organization, but also operates pretty independently in the field and allocates a lot of delegates a lot of authority to some of those field commanders to fire these rockets off the beds of trucks, pickup trucks, So any moment here where Hezbollah violates any term of this ceasefire, Prime Minister made it very clear tonight that they'll hit back hard and they'll respond hard.
But you indicated that 60% of Israelis don't think this dispute or this conflict is over. Is there a feeling among that 60% and the likes of Ben Gvir and the gang, is there a feeling that Netanyahu has capitulated here? Will it affect Netanyahu's standing?
They're saying as much, but at the same time, we earlier in the day were hearing that the Knesset was split, that there wasn't going to be ministers in this parliament that would agree to what is taking shape, that they potentially would threaten the prime minister's coalition. And tonight, that dissent is much quieter. We are seeing more and more momentum within the different elements of this Israeli government supporting the decision. And I think that's probably because it's been pretty clearly communicated. And just based on the fact that I'm getting it from so many different directions, that Israeli government officials are saying, this is a pause. Everybody, catch their breath. We're going to recollect. And the true decision that is being made here is not an end to this conflict. There's still more to be had here. And I think the key element in his speech, too, the prime minister's number one war aim here, the number one war goal, return 60,000 evacuated residents to northern Israel. Yep. He spoke about that a bit in his statement. He said that is our ultimate goal, but he didn't provide a timeline. And he didn't say that during the course of the ceasefire that those evacuated residents will be allowed to return. I think that's pretty telling.
Meanwhile, final question, Zach, thanks very much for joining us again. What's the situation down in Gaza? Does that war continue? What's happening down there?
Yeah, we still had 2 additional IDF soldiers killed in the northern Gaza Strip. That fight in the Jabalia area, Gaza City, it's still very hot. And perhaps that is where we see the IDF focusing over the next 60 days a bit more intently. But at the same time, as I've been in this group chat with other journalist colleagues here in Israel, they're getting word squeaks out of Egypt that potentially we're going to see this as soon as this week some new mediation efforts on a Gaza ceasefire, that they're going to try and tie the two together. But this is all, again, contingent on Hamas releasing the remaining hostages, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has been very clear there's no ceasefire whatsoever unless they start to see hostages come out.
Absolutely. Zach, thank you so much. Great to talk to you. Look after yourself over there. Zach
Thanks.
Anders there, war correspondent currently in northern Israel, reporting that Hezbollah has just literally witnessed a volley of missiles coming in from Hezbollah in Lebanon. And we're also hearing that Israel has been launching attacks up there in Lebanon as well. So as this ceasefire approaches, it's clearly not actually going to happen until tomorrow morning, if it does at all. But it does sound as if a peace pact or a ceasefire deal has been agreed and will start tomorrow morning, that is. But down in Gaza, still the problems. Unless Hamas release the hostages, I don't see how Israel can stop. So maybe no sight of a peace deal down there. So lots still to come.